World War II, a global conflict that reshaped the world, is often remembered for the horrors of the Holocaust in Europe. However, another equally horrifying chapter unfolded in Asia, perpetrated by Imperial Japan. This period, often referred to as the Asian Holocaust, witnessed unspeakable atrocities committed by Japanese soldiers across occupied territories. In the early decades of the 20th century, Japan underwent a significant transformation, evolving from a feudal society into an industrial and military powerhouse. This rapid modernization was driven by a desire to avoid the fate of other Asian nations that had fallen prey to Western colonialism. With the Meiji Restoration, Japan looked to Western nations as models for development, eagerly adopting their technological, political, and military advancements. However, this admiration soon turned into a competitive drive for regional dominance. Nationalism surged in Japan, fueled by the belief that the country was destined to lead Asia. This growing nationalism was intertwined with the concept of Bushido, the samurai code of honor, which was revived and adapted to serve the modern military ethos. The Bushido code emphasized loyalty, bravery, and honor to the point of death. In the hands of militarists, it became a tool to foster unquestioning obedience to the state and the emperor, who was revered as a divine figure. Japan's industrialization created a need for natural resources, which the nation lacked. This necessity drove its expansionist policies, as securing resources became synonymous with national survival and prosperity. The military, increasingly influential in government, advocated for a foreign policy based on conquest and colonization. The Sino-Japanese War in 1894-1895 and the Russo-Japanese War in 1904-1905 marked Japan's emergence as a formidable military power. The first major step in Japan's aggressive expansion was the invasion of Manchuria in 1931. Under the guise of the Mukden Incident, a staged event engineered as a pretext for invasion, Japanese forces swiftly took control of Manchuria. This occupation was marked by extreme brutality and exploitation of resources and people. Manchuria became a puppet state under the name of Manchukuo, serving as a launch pad for further military campaigns. In 1937, Japan escalated its expansionist policy by launching a full-scale invasion of China, leading to the Second Sino-Japanese War. This conflict, which eventually merged into the broader theater of World War II, was characterized by widespread atrocities against both soldiers and civilians. The Japanese military, operating under a doctrine of total war and driven by a belief in their racial and moral superiority, committed acts of unspeakable cruelty. The war in China also demonstrated Japan's willingness to defy international norms, as seen in its rejection of the League of Nations' condemnation of its actions in Manchuria. The Japanese invasion of China was just the beginning. In the following years, Japan's military machine expanded its reach across East and Southeast Asia, invading countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. This campaign of expansion was driven by a combination of strategic objectives, resource acquisition, and a deeply ingrained belief in Japan's destiny to dominate Asia. The stage was set for some of the darkest chapters in the region's history, as Japanese forces brought with them a level of brutality and disregard for human life that stunned the world. In December 1937, the world witnessed one of the most horrifying atrocities of modern warfare, the Nanking Massacre. Following the capture of Nanjing, then the capital of nationalist China, Japanese forces unleashed an orgy of violence against the city's residents, marking a chilling high point in the brutality of the Second Sino-Japanese War. The savagery lasted for approximately 6 weeks, during which the Japanese army conducted a systematic campaign of murder, rape, and destruction. Hundreds of thousands of civilians and disarmed soldiers were indiscriminately killed. Soldiers embarked on mass executions, often using decapitation contests and bayonet practice as grotesque forms of entertainment. The brutality extended to rampant sexual violence. Women, from young girls to the elderly, were subjected to relentless rape and abuse. The ferocity left the city decimated, its streets lined with corpses and buildings reduced to rubble. The terror inflicted in Nanking was not just a military operation, but a deliberate act of dehumanization and terror. It was a stark display of the Japanese military's sadistic brutality and utter disregard for human life and dignity. The massacre, extensively documented by both Chinese sources and international witnesses, including Western journalists and missionaries, sent shockwaves around the world. However, despite the global outrage, the massacre continued unabated, reflecting the extent of the Japanese army's impunity. The horrors of Nanking were emblematic of a broader pattern of Japanese military conduct across their occupied territories. Throughout East and Southeast Asia, Japanese forces systematically perpetrated atrocities against civilians and prisoners of war. This pattern of abuse was not random, but a product of a military culture that devalued the lives of those they conquered. Mass killings and the brutal treatment of civilians became a hallmark of Japanese occupation. From the three alls policy, kill all, burn all, loot all in China, to the Bataan Death March in the Philippines, the Japanese military left a trail of destruction and death. Perhaps the most insidious of these atrocities was the system of sexual slavery. An estimated 200,000 women, euphemistically known as comfort women, were coerced into sexual servitude for the Japanese military. These women, primarily from Korea, China, and other occupied territories, endured unspeakable suffering in military brothels. Forced labor was another grim reality under Japanese occupation. Millions of civilians and prisoners of war from across Asia and the Pacific were conscripted into labor under brutal conditions. They worked in mines, construction sites, and military facilities, often with little food, inadequate shelter, and no medical care, leading to high mortality rates. Unit 731, established in 1936 and led by Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii, was a secret research and development unit that carried out some of the most heinous war crimes of the 20th century. Based in Pingfang, China, near Harbin, this unit was a primary center for Japanese biological and chemical warfare research. The activities conducted within the walls of Unit 731 were hidden under the guise of medical research, but in reality, they constituted unfathomable human rights abuses. The unit conducted experiments on human beings that were barbaric and inhumane. Prisoners of war, primarily Chinese and Russian, along with some Koreans and Mongolians, were subjected to procedures that were nothing short of torture. Vivisection, often performed without anesthesia, was common. Prisoners were infected with diseases like plague, anthrax, cholera, and typhus to study their effects. These logs, as the human subjects were coldly referred to, were also subjected to frostbite testing and forced to endure high-pressure chambers, bomb blasts, and chemical weapons testing. Unit 731's experiments extended to biological warfare, testing plague-infested fleas and cholera-coated bread. These were used in field tests on Chinese cities to observe the spread of diseases and their mortality rate. The death toll from these experiments and subsequent biological warfare attacks is estimated to be in the tens of thousands. After the war, in a controversial decision, many of Unit 731's scientists were granted immunity from prosecution by the United States in exchange for the data they had collected. The secrecy surrounding Unit 731's activities and the post-war agreements meant that many of these crimes went unpunished, and the victims saw little justice. The widespread brutality perpetrated by the Japanese military during World War II can be traced back to several cultural and ideological factors deeply ingrained in Japanese society at the time. Central to this was the Bushido Code, a set of traditional Japanese values associated with the samurai class. The code emphasized virtues like honor, courage, and loyalty to one's master. However, during the war years, this code was distorted by the military to justify extreme forms of obedience and brutality. The education system in Japan also played a significant role in fostering a militaristic and nationalistic mindset. From a young age, Japanese children were indoctrinated with ideas of imperial destiny and national superiority. The state propagated a narrative that glorified sacrifice for the emperor and the nation, creating a populace that was fiercely loyal and often unquestioning of the state's militaristic ambitions. Moreover, Japanese propaganda played a crucial role in dehumanizing the enemy. This propaganda painted the Chinese, Koreans, and Allied prisoners as subhuman, thereby conditioning Japanese soldiers to see their acts of violence as justifiable, even necessary. This dehumanization made it easier for soldiers to commit atrocities, as they no longer saw their victims as fellow human beings deserving of empathy and respect. Post-war, as the world came to grips with the scale of Japanese war crimes, efforts were made to bring perpetrators to justice. The Tokyo trials, similar to the Nuremberg trials in Germany, saw key Japanese military and political leaders prosecuted. However, many believe that justice was not fully served, as some high-ranking officials and members of Unit 731 were granted immunity for their scientific data. Today, the legacy of Japan's wartime atrocities remains a sensitive and controversial topic. It has impacted Japan's relations with its neighbors, particularly China and Korea. Issues of historical memory, recognition, and reparation continue to be contentious. The remembrance of these events serves as a painful reminder and a call for vigilance against the recurrence of such inhumanity. The Asian Holocaust, marked by the sadistic actions of Japanese soldiers during World War II, represents a harrowing period of history. It serves as a stark reminder of the depths of cruelty that can arise from unchecked militarism and dehumanization of the other. The lessons learned from this period continue to be relevant in today's global context, where the ideals of peace, understanding, and respect for human rights remain as vital as ever.